All right. We're on to bad. For the most part, you and I agree, except for one thing. I'm going to let you talk about it because I think you're very passionate about this. Sugar-free Red Bull strategy. Have at it.
I wanted to go back and watch the part of the race on board where the strategy fell apart because it didn't make sense to me. I mean, all the teams were kind of struggling with this class 3 rain for an unknown amount of time, uncertainty of whether it was going to go over the track or around the track, and if it'd be 1 lap or 6 laps, and whether it was going to be in 6 laps time or 10 laps time. So it was a shitty thing to call because the track was more or less dry right when the rain was coming, right? And that's what we saw. People went in, changed tires for 1 lap, and then had to come in for new inters. It's a difficult one to pinpoint where it went wrong. And I'm going to say that all of the teams kind of fudged the decision. Nobody nailed it perfectly. Now, obviously, McLaren kind of had the best of the non-perfect strategies because they had both cars out in front afterwards. But everybody kind of hesitated. And with margins as close as they are, you can't hesitate. And we've seen this from RB before. A lot of times screwing over Daniel Ricciardo with these bizarre strategy calls to either leave him out there indefinitely or pull him in early and give him the worst tire possible and try and make him go, 95% of the race on a tire that hasn't given him performance.
Softs. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Whatever. So this was definitely whoever was running the numbers either didn't do it fast enough or screwed it up real bad and brought him in right at the point where he would fall to the back. And sure enough, that's what happened. He was basically dead last. He passed the Haas's, which wasn't hard to do. And then he was too far back at that point to catch Gasly. So he could have been anywhere realistically between 5th and 7th if RB had simply used the same strategy as everybody else. But they didn't.
No.
And if I'm remembering correctly, it was basically the safety car came out, and instead of pitting him right away, which they had time to do, they waited a couple of laps. Which, at that point, why fucking bother? Let them go racing again and pit him after the race starts. Like, you're going to lose all the positions anyway. Mm-hmm. So, it was frustrating to watch because he did everything right. There was not a single mistake in that race that Yuki made. The team let him down.
Oh, yeah.
And the team lost them what could have been 10 points on race 1.
Absolutely. Like, he was holding 6th really well up until the fuckery. Like, he was not... He lost 5th, yeah, but there were some faster cars ahead of him. He was holding on well. That was 8 points they threw away. And I'd like to remind you, like I did preseason, it's former Ferrari strategist there. I didn't know this, but you know who messed up Charles Leclerc's win in 2022 in Monaco? I saw it on Drive to Survive. They showed an angle of the pit wall calling him in too early in the newest season. And you know who made the call?
Mm-hmm.
It was Laurent Mekies, in charge of Red Bull. I know he's not the head strategist, but I'm just saying, starts from the top. So they can be great, they could be fast, but if they keep fucking up the strategy, it doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. So I'm maybe not as animated or emotional about it as you wanted me to be. I had some, let's say, stronger words as it happened to you, but I'll leave that off to the side. I don't want to incite any violence.
I do.
Or be seen to incite violence.
What's the point in having a podcast, Sean? All right, I guess we'll be PG. Anything else you want to add on that?
The team is going to cost Yuki the Drivers' Championship this year.
That will incite violence. That comment right there. Okay.
Sorry, just on a serious note, though, Yuki Tsunoda is a case study in how to make a good F1 driver. I'm not saying a great F1 driver, but from where he came to where he is now, it's phenomenal. And frankly, we only have one person to thank for that, who we've lost on the grid. So good luck getting that again.
Indeed. Franz Tost, who brought us Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, and Yuki.
Exactly. And we've talked about it before, but Helmut Marko didn't give us Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel. Franz Tost did.
Exactly. And that's a great point. If you want more good, solid drivers in midfield teams, you want someone like Yuki Tsunoda. You don't want this constant carousel of Oliver Behrmans, like these lackluster, underperforming, talked up individuals. You want the Yuki Tsunoda, who's maybe underappreciated, but becomes something that's very special, or at least solid.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you and I have a complete agreement on bad. Oh, I just want to talk about Carlos Sainz very quickly. Once again, spinning out exactly the same way he did in Sao Paulo. And I don't know what it is about him in wet weather, with all the experience he has and all the exceptional races he does. There's no excuse for something like that. I understand it's a new car, or you're trying to figure it out. Like lap one, spinning out when you're in point scoring position, it could have been double points for Williams, a massive result. I think you're better than that. So I'm going to put him in the bad category.
That's fair. It did seem like a bit of a rookie move. James Vowles was on the post-race show, and when it happened, Carlos over the team radio said it felt like a torque surge. And you could see it, that he wasn't on the gas per se. Like he was moving, he was going around, trying to race. And it was on an upshift, which is not where you would expect to see a snap oversteer. All right. Usually in the wet like that, you'd see a kind of an unwanted snap oversteer if you're downshifting, where the engine is going to put more torque to the wheels naturally. And I'm not discounting the potential that Vowles could be making excuses for Sainz.
Mm-hmm.
He does say some stupid things sometimes, but it does make sense that it would catch Carlos off. Like, I don't think what he felt was necessarily a problem with the car. I think it's a byproduct of the Mercedes engine and gearbox. I think it's a programming thing where on the upshift, they're feeding in more torque to balance out the loss in power that you get from the higher gear, which I'm sure all the F1 teams do. But they're all going to do it differently, and the gearboxes and everything are going to react differently as well. And I think in those conditions, which Sainz hasn't seen, he hasn't tested the car in the rain, right? I think that caught him off. And it's still a bit of a rookie move, so he's not faultless in it. But I'm going to chalk it up to growing pains with the team.
Okay. I guess I was just more disappointed. Could have been a really good start for a team that I rate highly this year. That's a fair point.
It could have been a phenomenal start, but it got thrown away.
Mm-hmm. All right. Lawson. We're both in agreement that it was awful. Well, not just us. I think anybody with eyes who watches Formula One could see that this was just not a good weekend for him.
No.
Yeah. Who do you blame? Him or Red Bull for putting him in this position?
Both. I know it's a bit of a cop-out answer.
No, I think that's probably right. Yeah, go on.
This is a prime example of why you need balanced performance across the team. All right, they've developed a car that is so single-sided, and we've beat this point to death that that is Max's car. I don't think there's anybody on the grid that could drive that car next to him.
Hmm.
Like, in all honesty, I think whoever they put there is going to struggle. You take Yuki out of RB now and put him into that car, and he may do better than Lawson and Perez, but I think he's going to struggle compared to where he is at RB. I don't think he gets fifth in qualifying in the Red Bull.
Wow.
So there is an issue at Red Bull in the way that they've biased themselves to the one side. That's kind of hamstrung them, and now they have to kind of live with it. But at the same time, Liam talked a big game,
Mm-hmm.
and he thought he could do it. And holy shit, he could not. Like, it wasn't even close.
No. No,
You
no.
know, he didn't get a lot of running in free practice, but that wasn't necessarily his fault.
Uh,
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, he was making mistakes that Perez was making, like going off on the curbs, losing time. I really just thought the car was not suited for Perez, but you're right. It might just be not suited for anybody but Max. But yeah, it wasn't. And you just continue your point. Yeah, it wasn't his fault that he didn't get time in free practice.
It wasn't his fault. I think he had a reasonable run in FP1, unless I'm forgetting something. And then FP2, he had a water pump issue or something like that. So he lost basically the entire FP2 session. And then FP3, he had some running, but again, it's trying to catch up on the program that he lost out on. So he didn't get much in the way of meaningful running. But at this point, after testing, after the runs he's done in the old generation cars and the older ground effects cars, he should have a feel for what that car is. So if he had confidence that he was up there on Max's level, good enough to be a teammate that's better than Checo, which if you listen to all the interviews and all the Drive to Survive footage and everything else, that's what he claims, that he's the better teammate for Max in that car. Well, not based on this race, bud.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go off on Red Bull right now, unless you have anything else.
No, go ahead, have at them.
You mentioned Drive to Survive. That episode with Lawson and Red Bull, and this is including Horner, and even, unfortunately, Daniel Ricciardo, about the way they talked about Sergio Perez. I want to see Max win, but I want to see the rest of Red Bull suffer for that. A 15-year veteran who won 6 races and did you huge solids in 21, 22, and even 23, was right about the development of the car, was telling you how to fix it, and you ignored him and then talked shit behind his back all of last season. You made your bed with Lawson, and I hope they sleep the entire year while he scores no points. Because this is fucking ridiculous. And you're right. Now they've put themselves in this position where they can only rely on one driver. Potentially one of the best drivers of all time, maybe even the best. And not only do they foist us with Lawson while he struggles, they fuck Max's strategy in potentially in costing him a win. And Max is upbeat about this whole situation, and he's biding his time. I think he's gonna find something in development. But if you have only one driver to focus on, why would you leave him out an extra lap in the rain when you know the rain's not stopping? It's worse than everybody expected, and McLaren already pitted. There is Max. If Max wins anything this year, it's all him, and he might be the best driver of all time for it because he's not getting any help from anybody else. And yeah, everybody knows my thoughts on Lawson already. I'm not going to rehash that. This wasn't surprising to me. And again, in Drive to Survive, he's like, I'm antsy. I want to get in the car. Wait your fucking turn. You've done nothing to earn it. And now here's your chance, and you shit the bed the entire weekend. It's one race. Mm-hmm. It's one race. I'm a little more mad at just the comments they made last year than this one race. I think he could still have an okay year, but he's not catching Perez. That's pretty clear. I said that before this race, and now this race just made me solidify my views. So good luck to you, son.
Yeah. And just to put it into perspective, like, yes, it's one race. The performance gap between them was massive, in relation to the rest of the grid, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a very tight field. From 1 to 20 in Q1 was like, I think, just over a second, which sounds like a lot, but no, it's not. To have all 20 cars within a second of each other in Q1 is pretty impressive. But he's still at the back of the field. Like, was unable to make that car get any closer. And then the conditions were not great. And when you look at it, the conditions in Australia were probably going to be the best conditions we're going to get for the next 4 weeks. China, not as hot as Australia. It tends to rain and be kind of foggy and abysmal this time of year in China. I might be wrong. I haven't seen the weather forecast, but we were there a similar timing last year, were we not?
No, it was, I think, end of April, early May, but still. Yeah.
Okay.
And Japan were a bit earlier
too. It should actually, yeah. So it should actually potentially be colder. And then Japan is what I was going to say is going to be cold and potentially rainy. So really, by the time we're looking at, let's say, good conditions again, or, foregoing the potential of rain or, cold weather that may fuck with certain performance metrics, you're back in Bahrain. And Bahrain is important because that's where they've benchmarked their cars against. The temperature in Bahrain is going to be similar when we get there to what it was in testing. It'll probably be a little bit warmer. And a lot of these cars that struggled in Australia, I think we're hoping for a warmer race to get more to that Bahrain level. Like Haas was not terrible in Bahrain, but the car did nothing at all in Australia. And I don't think that is a step back that happened. I think that is a byproduct of a design direction that they've taken. So, putting this all back to Liam Lawson, if he's not confident in that car and the car is too pointy, which is what we've heard from several people about that car, that Max likes it pointy and nobody else does, and that doesn't breed confidence in a driver who's not comfortable in the car, and you've got 2 more races where it's potentially cold and wet, maybe some storms, maybe some odd weather patterns, it's not going to do anything for Liam's confidence. So we may get to Miami and be having the same conversations about Liam that we were about Sergio.
And Jack Doohan. But yeah, sorry.
Sure.
I'm just saying, if anyone will want to be replaced after 5 races, you're right, it might be Liam. So we'll see.
I don't want him replaced after 5 races. Like you said, I want Red Bull to sit in it. I want them to come P5 in the Constructors' Championship this year.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think that's unrealistic if they just have one driver.
If one person's scoring points, yeah, you would have to do a whole lot. Yeah, he could probably get them 4th by himself. Maybe. Oof. The problem with your logic is that, unfortunately, it looks like Racing Bulls also only has one driver. And I know it's one race, but Hajar didn't exactly breed any confidence in anybody, and including himself.
Yeah, and I don't want to give Liam the excuse because I railed on him about this last week. Hajar's been to Australia in ground effects cars.
Yeah.
Not in the rain, but he knows that track well. That was, I mentioned to you before qualifying that I'm pretty sure he's sitting in the garage shitting his pants by the look on his face. I think that was entirely nerves. He hit a white line that's not part of the circuit, it's part of the actual street that the circuit is on. And they try and cover up those markings, but they can't get rid of them completely. And it's not the same paint that the the track markings are. So there's no grip to it at all. And once it gets a little bit of moisture, it's like ice.
Mm.
And yeah, no experience with it. He made a big mistake with a lot more horsepower than he was used to, and it bit him immediately. So it's unfortunate, but that goes to show the level of inexperience, let's say.
My fiance was making.
And at the same time,
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say my fiance was making fun of me. It's like, why are you watching the formation lap? It's like, well, something can happen, and it did. So, yeah,
Exactly. I mean, he didn't qualify well either, but it wasn't the offset that we had with Verstappen and Liam.
yeah, and
I want to say he made it out of Q1, did he not?
yeah, he qualified 11th, which is okay. It was no Yuki. It's kind of a
11 is pretty good.
Yeah, but it was a Yuki Daniel offset. It was quite a bit.
Yeah. I'll give him that.
Yeah. And it's now 2 races in a row since Abu Dhabi where he's just cannot start. And I'm gonna connect dots that maybe aren't connected here, but Marco made an interesting comment. He said it was a bit embarrassing that Hadjar sat there and cried. And I wonder if that's a different side of Hadjar's emotions, where he's either angry or overly dramatic. And I think subconsciously, you can't fail if you don't start. You know what I mean? Like, I can't show how bad I am if I never start a race. Like, I didn't really lose. I just couldn't get off the line in F2. It was an unfortunate mistake. And like, I didn't screw up and did not start on my debut. I just made an innocent, honest mistake. Like, I think subconsciously he's setting himself up to be a failure. And it's interesting to me that Marco kind of immediately called that out. He said, just, put your head up, get back out there type of thing. Like, it's another part of his emotion. Sorry, go on.
We've talked about this before. Marco needs to retire. Marco needs to be nowhere near this shit anymore. You're overthinking it, frankly.
I agree. But
what Marco's comment was basically he needs to man up and, stop crying. Nothing about getting back out there. Marco's comment was quite literally he needs to be a man and not cry. That's it. I mean, the kid just blew his first race, his first chance to prove anything in F1 on the first lap. Like, I guarantee you, he's beating himself up more than anybody else can, and that emotion is genuine shame at what happened and the fact that he made that mistake. I don't think your comment has any merit to his mental state whatsoever. It was a stupid mistake. He realizes he made the mistake, and that's what had him so emotional. We've talked about it before where he is overly emotional. I'm not denying that, right? He gets angry for no reason whatsoever. He needs to calm the fuck down. He needs to go to the France Toast finishing school like Yuki did. And that's the unfortunate part, is that he doesn't have anybody there to do it. He's got this fucking dinosaur in Marco who has no real say in his career anymore at this point. I don't see them wanting him at Red Bull, right? We saw that last year where, okay, he was doing good in F2, but everybody kind of forgot that Isaac Hadjar was a thing in the Red Bull universe. And now he's there because they needed a driver and they realized, oh shit, we got rid of Danny. We can't bring him back again. So let's put Isaac in there, right? Marco was never going to give him a chance at Red Bull. Christian was never going to give him a chance at Red Bull. So Marco doesn't give a fuck. He's an old Austrian dinosaur who just needs to disappear. Every time they show him on a fucking race weekend now, he looks more and more like Emperor Palpatine.
That's facts. I hope he wears a hoodie next time it
die
rains.
Already.
I hope he wears a hoodie next time it rains, Sean. But anyway,
I'm pretty sure there's a picture of him out there in a Red Bull hoodie like that.
Okay. No comments about dying yet.
Yeah, everybody dies, Nick. Especially when you're 95.
He looks 95. I think he's only like early 80s, but he looks like it's coming.
He's up there.
You want to go off on Haas too while you're at it? What the fuck was that?
Yeah, Haas. We talked about him in testing that they didn't look great, but they also didn't get kind of played into showing anything, right? They kind of went out there and deliberately ran test programs and didn't do anything over the top. That being said, the feedback was generally optimistic and no one was really concerned. But we got the first indications in FP1 that perhaps something was wrong. When Esteban went out there and said, wow, the car's really smooth. It's almost too smooth.
Oh, fuck.
Right? Like it's too comfortable, which may sound a bit weird, but as a racing driver, if you're not feeling everything coming through your body, right? If you're not feeling every little pebble on the track, you're missing that feedback. And unfortunately, that's what the weekend kind of evolved into. So that neither of them had confidence in that car. They couldn't seem to put it where they wanted it to go. It wasn't nearly as fast as they thought it should be. Yeah, it was a bad weekend for them.
I wonder if Komatsu is just too much of a brain. He's trying too perfect to compensate for Steiner. He's like, let's make this a better car to drive, because the constant complaint for the last 10 years is that car is a monster. It's like you need experience to drive it. He's gone completely 180, and that's also not good. He's made it too comfortable.
No, but that's directionally that's wrong, and any engineer who's in motorsports as long as he has would know that, right? You don't want a car to be comfortable from a ride standpoint. The car previously was unpredictable. I think it's predictable now, but something has gone off from testing, right? If you look at all the analysis that was done, Haas was not at the bottom of the pack. They weren't up there, right? No one was expecting them to be P4, P5, whatever in qualifying, but they shouldn't have been where they were. Sauber should have been below them, and that didn't happen. And I'm going to partially go back to the drivers.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a rookie who has virtually no experience developing anything, showed that he couldn't really get a handle on the ground effect F2 cars. And then you've got Esteban, who we've talked about many times, is absolutely useless as a driver. So they're not getting development feedback. And as much shit as you want to give Nico Hulkenberg, he's been around long enough that he knows what feedback to give. And who else do they have? It was K-Mag, right? K-Mag, same sort of thing. Not a great driver, but he's been around long enough. He knows the ropes. And Ocon's been around for a bit, but realistically not that long, right? We have to remember that he was on the grid and then off the grid, and then he got back on. And he kind of floundered around with Alpine, and, you know, between him and Alonso were probably the reason Alpine slipped so far back to begin with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they made the wrong choice in driver, and that's having knock-on effects to development.
Yeah, but stuff like this was supposed to happen mid-season. And you're right, they weren't supposed to be this bad. So I guess the alarm bells need to go off, and they need to start looking in the mirror right away. I want to just chalk this off to one race, but by the sounds of what you're saying, it might just be a whole structural thing. Like, it might be like the foundation might be off.
I mean, that's why I brought up the thing about going back to Bahrain. If we get back to Bahrain and they haven't brought upgrades and the car performs better, then it just could be similar to what we've seen with Ferrari, Mercedes, Williams the last few years, where the car is very condition specific. Right? They might have a condition where you've got, let's say, a more abrasive tarmac in hot weather, where the car likes to perform in that condition. Right? Their cooling package is such that they're overcooled in colder climates, which is not great for performance. And then it could be that they're not putting enough heat into the tires through the design of the car, and they need a more abrasive tarmac. Right? Those are things that would have impacted them. Now, Australia was warm when it wasn't raining, right? Friday, Saturday, it was pretty warm there. So that might not be the saving grace, but they did say also that Australia was hotter than Bahrain. So maybe it's the opposite of what I had said, right? Maybe their car's undercooled.
Interesting. You're never going to get a sweet spot. If they're relying on sweet spots of weather, it's never going to happen.
And that's not what it is. It's the way in which you design the car and how it rejects heat and how it uses the energy available to it. If you make that operating window fairly wide and you make the car kind of compliant to a wide operating range, you get better performance, right? And that's where we see guys like Norris and the McLaren is good at 80% of the tracks, or the extreme Max Verstappen and Red Bull a couple of years ago being good at 22 of 23 tracks, right? They had the one outlier, but everywhere else they had the operating window to nail it. So Haas may have taken a step back in the sense that the operating window got smaller, because last year their operating window was pretty even. But these things happen sometimes when you make design choices that are, let's say, extreme. They might work for you, they might not.
Like you said with Bierman and making the damage bill go higher, it could be a long season for them.
Yeah.
Great choice, Haas. I wonder if Gunther Steiner, I didn't see him at all on any of the broadcasts. I wonder if he's still okay with this choice of Oliver Bierman being the driver he would have replaced at Haas. So it's good to know that no matter who was in charge at Haas, they were going to go completely fucking backwards. Ferrari. Do you want to talk about Ferrari now? Or do you want to have anything else you want to say about Haas?
Ferrari. Well, I mean, they did what they always do, didn't they? Clearly Hamilton wasn't having it. I mean, the weekend didn't look so bad, and then qualifying didn't go great. I think everybody kind of expected Ferrari to be closer to the top than they were in qualifying. Because what did he qualify? 6th or something like that?
It was like 5th, 6th, maybe, or 6th, 7th. Something
7th. I think they were 7, 8.
Yes.
Because Albon and Tsunoda pipped them.
Yeah, that's right.
So that wasn't a great start. And that meant that Lewis Hamilton was kind of out of position on the grid in a car he really wasn't comfortable with. And clearly his engineer wasn't understanding what he was being told. Lewis has had that relationship with Bono for almost his entire career at this point. And the two of them were pretty well synced on what needed to be done during the race. And I can only imagine sitting there listening to that nonsense. And this is only what we got on the radio during the race. I didn't go back and listen on board, but I'm sure he was just being absolutely inundated with nonsense commands. And it was clear from what they did broadcast that Lewis wanted no part of it. Like at that point, he was basically just saying, without saying it this way, but basically, fuck off. Yeah. Leave me alone. Don't talk to me. Yeah, if I was Fred, I'd be looking for a replacement of that engineer. I know it's one race, and that may sound a bit extreme, but you had 70 laps to clue in that Lewis didn't want that, and you didn't. I don't know. I don't know how you get through preseason and testing and the first race, and you're still not clicking at that level. And that's not to say that he had that, it should have been the same as him and Bono. That's clear, but that was embarrassing.
Wasn't much better at the other side of the garage either. I don't know if Formula1.com showed Charles Leclerc's radio when they were lost in translation.
The water being the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to give Leclerc...
Yeah, the seat's full of water.
Yeah, the seat's full of water. What do you think it is? It might be the water. Yeah. Kudos to Leclerc for the best comeback of all time. Yeah. And let's add that to the words of wisdom. Brilliant.
Yeah.
They're bad.
Yeah.
Like, this obviously a bad weekend. They were always going to have bad weekends. The only reason why it's worth bringing up is that they talk themselves up so much and that this was going to be a good weekend for them. And they fell flat right away. And that's not good. That's like, that doesn't. Do you really need to be the underdogs that badly in order to win a race? Can you not handle any pressure as a team? That does not bode well.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Like, even Norris thought they were going to be a threat this weekend, and they were nowhere.
They were a threat to themselves. I think the only real racing that Hamilton did was against Leclerc.
And I was stuck behind Albon for many laps too, which is
Yeah, and that's like, I didn't mention it before, but like Yuki kept Albon at bay, which was a good job on Yuki. And then Hamilton had nothing for Albon. So, yeah.
Yeah, but Leclerc was just like a distant fifth. Even when he got ahead of Yuki, he wasn't even getting close to Russell. Him with experience with Ferrari, him supposedly in the sweet spot at Ferrari. All offseason, even on Drive to Survive, we've heard that this is his time. And we know Ferrari has a big hold on the media because the media was talking all offseason that this is the best two drivers that anyone could ask for. This is the best combination of drivers, even better than the McLarens, than Lando and Piastri. And they just kept saying that bullshit that we knew, that you and I knew wasn't true. But they hoped, like, the bigger the lie, the more people would believe it. And yeah, I think your comment in the text today was Ferrari, enough said. I think that sums it up brilliantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've gone off on them a million times. It's just another example of stupidity, really. Is there anything else to say? Is there anything you want to point out that you think you see there?
No, I think they need a big change on the pit wall. Last year they changed Leclerc's race engineer. I think they need to reevaluate who's doing what there, right? And that's part of what Fred was put in place to do. So let's get to it. Let's make them less.
Let's make them less
of the clowns that they are.
Good luck. I was just going to ask, do you think they could poach Bono? Won't help that much, but might help Lewis a little bit.
No, I think Mercedes just promoted Bono, didn't they? So he's Kimi's race engineer, but he's also got some other responsibilities there, and I think that was a deliberate attempt to try and keep him.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. Well, good luck then, Ferrari.
I mean, they'll find their footing. They'll come back. They'll get some good races, maybe even a win here or there. I don't doubt it, but it's definitely not a good start.
No. If they believe that they could win the constructors, this is not the race you wanted to start with. At all.
No.
At all. And
no, I had it here. What did they end up with?
4 points.
They ended up with 5 points.
Oh, 5.
4 for Leclerc, 1 for Hamilton.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, they came back last year a little bit, but yeah, I don't. Their saving grace might be that Red Bull is that, like, the rest of Red Bull is that bad, other than Max. So,
yeah, exactly.
Stay tuned.
Anyway,
all right, and our last point of the day is the McLaren team orders. I actually have McLaren with all bad. Funny enough, I know, like you said, McLaren should be proud of where their car is, but I think for this race, in my opinion, they were bad.
Yeah.
They were expected to win, and they threw away an easy one too. Would you like to talk about the team orders?
The team orders were absolutely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to make it seem like it wasn't what they were doing. Right? They were claiming they would needed to preserve some tire to try and buffer for any rain that did come, so that they had a tire if the rain was there without having to pit, yada, yada, yada. So they backed Piastri off, and he did what he was told. And kind of right as he had a big enough gap that Norris wasn't under pressure, they went, "Oh yeah, no, never mind. We're good now. Go ahead." You can't fucking tell the guy to go back racing and then he's free to race Norris after you've just given him, whatever it was, 6 or 8 seconds of a gap. Like, that was absolutely unnecessary. It was clear Piastri was faster at that stage of the race. Don't get in their way. They've proven that they're good enough to not cause problems, right? They've proven that they can race each other and not create 2 DNFs. Let them do it. Frankly, if they had done that, I think Piastri would have gotten past Norris before the pit stops, and McLaren probably would have biased it to Norris anyway, therefore handing the lead to Norris after the pit stops, which would have been just as shitty, but more believable, let's say. But I think Piastri could have won that race. And if they had let them fight and he had passed Norris and they hadn't biased the pit stops against him, he wouldn't have made that mistake. And then I think he would have had a bigger lead over Max at that point because he wouldn't have been forced into that mistake. But that's not what we got. And what have we said in the last season, Nick? What was my favorite what if saying?
If my mother had balls, she'd be my dad, or my uncle, mother or
If
uncle.
my aunt had
aunt. There you go.
If my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to wrap your head around.
It's not. It's just tough after you've listened to you butcher it.
I tried. Can you?
So yeah, that was unfortunate.
What happens when you pull the emergency brake on a freight train that's going full speed?
It derails.
Would Oscar Piastri have spun out if he was confidently in the lead? I don't think so.
No, and that's the point I was trying to make, right?
Yes.
If they hadn't have did what they did, he probably would have won that race. He wouldn't have made that mistake.
Exactly. You've put something into his head that has him probably seething. He was seething in the radio. He said, "I'm faster, but okay," in his home Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. That's Oscar's. Mm-hmm. That's DEFCON 2 for Oscar Piastri if he's making snide remarks, because we know this kid is very poised. Yeah. So he was basically...
And the fact that he got that car moving again shows you how pissed off he was.
Yes.
There was no way that car should have got back to the track. They had him shown as out on the race.
Yeah, they did. That's
right. They had
right.
to reverse it.
That's absolutely right. At his home Grand Prix, he wants to be the first Australian on the podium. And you just, once again, McLaren finding a way to lose a situation they had no business losing. You threw away, you could have had Norris number 2 and had a 1-2 and encouraged Norris the rest of the season to catch up to Piastri and show that he's number 1. Zach Brown on the Sky Sports broadcast said, when they get close, we're going to let them race. Only to, while they were still talking to him, have team orders placed on Oscar Piastri. So, yeah. Does he not know what's going on? Did he just duplicitously lie to us? I don't know if you saw midweek, they extended Piastri and not Norris. I know it's Piastri's home Grand Prix, and maybe they're going to probably extend Norris later in the season. But it's clear that they already believe in Oscar. So why do that to him? I don't...
Is Norris's contract up this year?
Next year. So they just...
so there's no reason...
There's no reason...
It's at the... His contract's up at the end of next year?
End of next year, yeah. But so was Piastri's. So they extended Piastri before Norris. Interesting.
Yeah, which is fine. I heard some chatter about that. I didn't pay too much attention, but it's clear that they want Piastri there. That lineup is strong. No one's doubting that lineup is strong. I think it's a no-brainer that Norris stays from a McLaren standpoint.
Is it?
The only way Norris leaves is if he wants to leave.
Or he can't win. And like we said,
he can clearly win.
He can't win the title. But this was Oscar's win, in my opinion. And that's why I'm putting
I
McLaren.
agree with that.
I'm putting McLaren in the bad right here because there's still these issues that we talked about last season where they're making a clear number one where there isn't necessarily a clear number one. They've chose Norris, but why not give that to Piastri? This is just, I think this is going to be a talking point throughout the season. They're going to find ways to lose more races. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that. The question is going to be, do they make fewer mistakes than the people around them?
We'll see.
Frankly, my worst case scenario is if McLaren makes more of these mistakes, Red Bull is a one-car team, and then the rest of the, contenders that we have on the chart so far aren't consistent enough, then we're back to Mercedes winning the championship.
Stop it, Sean. Stop it.
It's an ugly scenario, isn't it?
It's horrible. I don't want to see George Russell holding any trophies. Ugh.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say one thing about McLaren, just to wrap up the episode. Good on Norris for keeping his composure, and good on him for closing the door on turn one. After that,
Yeah.
they almost threw away a win. They definitely threw away a 1-2.
Yes.
So he has learned a bit. He has learned a little bit, but maybe Oscar has learned more, and I'm intrigued to see how Oscar responds next week.
Yeah, and we've talked about Oscar and your thoughts on him vis-a-vis Mark Webber. I think this shows that he's not Mark Webber. The fact that he was able to come back from effectively last place to get points, and not only a P10, but he fought past Hamilton to get P9, tells me he's got what it takes. And that when push comes to shove, he can get angry, and the anger doesn't manifest in stupidity. It manifests in even better driving.
Very good point. Mark did just get angry. However, devil's advocate, he still finished 9th through a little bit of unluckiness, which is kind of what happened in Mark Webber's career. So I think I agree with you, though. It is a little bit different. I don't think Red Bull fucked Mark as much as Mark fucked himself. McLaren's fucking Oscar several times over. So
Yeah, exactly.
And since I used the word fuck, I think that's the best place to end this episode. Sean?
All right.
Is there anything else you want to add just to this discussion?
No, I think it's a good race. I'm looking forward to this weekend in China. Hopefully the grass doesn't catch fire again.
No, wasn't that Japan? No, that was China. You're right. That was China. That's funny. First time back in China in 5 years and the grass lit on fire. I totally forgot about that.
Was it 2 or 3 times? Like something's going on.
Hell on earth.
Anyway.
Just kidding. So on that note then, you have yourself a wonderful rest of the night. And we'll be back to discuss what we saw in China.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.